Hi, everyone. My name is Ray Epstein, and I'm the Youth Engagement and Programs Coordinator for I Have the Right To. And to mark National Sexual Assault Awareness Month kickoff, we are launching the third season of our interview series with survivors and allies. And the goal of this series is to serve as a resource for fellow survivors that offers connection, offers encouragement, and insight for anyone who might be navigating their own personal journey. And the idea of these conversations came from a discussion with our founder, Chessie. She shared when she was younger that she had wished that there was a place that she could hear from other survivors, people who had walked a similar path to her, so she could offer hope, perspective, and some sense of solidarity to them. And this series grew out of that wish. So through these conversations, we want to highlight the voices of survivors, allies who are helping to create change by supporting one another, encouraging institutional courage, and also building stronger communities that listen to and stand with survivors. And we are so grateful to share these stories, and we're excited to learn from the incredible individuals that are joining us this season. And today we have Julian Bell with us. Julian, could you tell us a little bit about yourself, about what brought you to this movement and the work that you do?
Yeah, thanks, Ray, for having me. So my name is Julian Bell, and I am a Coast Guard soon-to-be veteran. I'm retiring in a month. And it's been counting down ever since we met, but it's so close. And moving more full-time into advocacy work and mental health awareness and profession. But my background is, first and foremost, I am a survivor of sexual assault within the military. And through my healing journey, it brought me to this wonderful point, right? Where I went through so many ups and downs throughout that journey. And finally, to the point where I feel empowered to use my voice and use my story to help others and also to heal myself, right? So over the past 2 years or so, I've become a whistleblower with the government due to Coast Guard corruption regarding military sexual assault and cover ups, which led me into becoming a victim advocate with the Coast Guard to help people one on one within the service. And then I also co created a nonprofit called Safe Waters, where we are peer to peer support for survivors of sexual assault within all branches of the military. And we've been around for about a year and 4 months now, year and 4 months, and we're taking off. It's been great. We've had such a great, warm reception, and just letting people know that they're not alone in their journeys it's been life changing for me and for those others that we help. So that's kind of why I'm here. And that's the quick rundown of what I do.
Thank you for sharing your background with us and what brings you to this work. And I'm curious if we could dive in a little bit, if you could set kind of the culture of the military and the Coast Guard, and particularly maybe your unit. What were things like around the time that you were involved before you were experiencing violence?
Yeah, so I joined in 2003, and my assault occurred just a year after in 2004. I was 19 when I joined, and so I was still 19 when I was assaulted, very young, first time away from home. I grew up in a military family, so I understood the culture, so to speak, of, packing your stuff and moving all the time, but I didn't understand what it was to live in it, to wear the uniform and what that fully entailed. And there's good and bad with that, right? And especially at that time, there was a lot of bad, a lot of abuse of power, a lot of positional abuse. And there was this almost free reign for people to manipulate others, and not just sexually, but just with their position and with how we treated each other. It was very toxic, I guess would be the best word for it, right? There was open hazing, there was rampant drug and alcohol use, there was inappropriate relationships, at least with the units I was in. And speaking with others, especially other survivors throughout the years, it was pretty rampant throughout all the branches. And sadly, it still happens in many cases, right? There's still a lack of oversight and there's a lack of accountability when it comes to these things, especially in the higher ranks. So looking at it from the military perspective, it's very regimented and by design, right? I think I've mentioned this before in some of the panels I sat with you. It's like we do tough missions, we do hard things, we do jobs that require obedience, right? They don't have time to second guess an order. You act, you behave the way that you're trained and you do the mission. And that's very effective. However, it doesn't leave room for question when there's misuse sometimes and that abuse of power, which is what happens. Um, it's sad, but it's a trickle down effect. Sometimes that abuse can take place within a unit and within a command, and it is swept under the rug, right? Because that hierarchy cannot be questioned. That positional power is infallible, right? And if something comes in that makes it look like it's not, it's pushed away, right? So that system is used to protect itself. Um, and that's what happened with my case and many others. It's swept under the rug to protect the system. So there's a lot of inherent problems, especially back then. I will say things have gotten better, right? It's not perfect, but things are better. We do have sexual assault prevention and response programs. We have people that are volunteer victim advocates like myself throughout all the branches. We have sexual assault response coordinators that manage all that stuff. So there are steps in the right direction. However, there are still many problems.
So it sounds like it was just a perfect breeding ground for abuse with the culture of silence, with the hazing, with the manipulation and the obedience that had to be kind of instilled into your units. But is this stuff that you noticed, you feel after in hindsight and reflecting on what could have created this sort of environment? Or was it kind of common knowledge that this was happening and was it talked about?
Yeah, the abuse, I mean, it was very common knowledge that the structure could not be questioned, right? And it was very enforced and very open, very blatant that you don't ask for help. And if you do, you're seen as weak. You don't speak out against wrongs. If you do, you're going against the grain, and we can't have that. But as far as the sexual assault things, there were rumblings of it even back when I was assaulted. I heard of cases, I heard of people, something happening. And it wasn't until later that I found out the truth behind some of those instances of people that I was working with. Even on, it's sad to say, I heard some horrible stories. And it was very much that protectionism of if you make a report of this, you're going to ruin that man's career. If you really need to think about what you're going to say because you're going to harm the ship, you're going to harm the Coast Guard, you're going to harm that man's family, you're going to like all those things were just so prevalent in the conversation behind closed doors at senior levels, at senior leadership levels. It was just part of the culture, right? Um, Again, sadly, like at that time when I was 19, 20, I wasn't privy to those conversations. I was the lowest person on the totem pole. I was the kid that was running around the boat, and we call it rust busting, where you you literally walk around with a sandpaper and a needle gun and you're chasing rust on the ship and painting it, like you're doing the grunt work, you're cleaning the dishes, you're scrubbing the toilets. Like you're not privy to those conversations. But with the hindsight, those conversations were happening. And as I moved up in rank, right, and I've been in for 23 years, I've been on some of those conversations. I've heard that talk from leadership, from people in positions of power, that it's not a victim first approach. It's not about, sometimes it is. Lately, there are commands. Again, I'll speak to the good commands too. There are people that do have that in mind. But what happens a lot is that protection, that self-serving attitude of response to a sexual assault, right? And it's very unfortunate.
So, given your experience of what happens behind closed doors and then also the conversations that are taking place, what would you say your perspective is now on what real leadership led with courage and bravery and empathy would look like in a kind of perfect world if you could design it?
That's great. And I've seen that in action, right? Like again, I don't want to just paint the bad light. And I've seen some commands that really step forward and take care of their people and put their money where their mouth is, right? Where they have an instance, and I'll use a specific case without naming names, but I had to fly I'm stationed in California, and I had to fly to somewhere on the East Coast and speak with a command about a rape case. And I spoke with the senior officers and the senior enlisted people that were managing and helping that person. And they were so genuine. It was just this open, like they just had this love in their heart of saying, when we found out what happened to this person, our first response was, and this person was at training in a different place. So that our first response was, we need to bring her home. We need to take care of her. Whatever it is that she needs, we're going to do it. And that was just the initial response, right? And there were things that happened along the way with the investigation that fell apart, but the command's perspective of like, this is one of our own. This is like our son, our daughter, our brother, our sister. And we are going to do everything we can. And we're going to listen to them. And we're going to trust that what they're saying is real. And like whatever it is they're going through, we may not have the answers on how to help them, but we're going to find people that can. Right. And we're going to entrust them to professionals and like all this stuff. Like, that was just like the most, having seen so many cases go sideways and like fall apart, to have like a command like that was just this shining example of, wow, this can be done right, right? Like, and Coast Guard and military, we all have policy and procedures on how to handle these things, right? Like, you have a sexual assault or harassment case, and there's a checklist to go through, right? And it's good. Follow that checklist. It's going to keep you out of legal trouble, right? And it's going to protect the member in a legal sense. But where's the humanity of that, right? Where's the heartfelt emotion of, I just want to make sure that this person's taken care of, right? Regardless of whatever happens with their investigation, whatever happens with their career, it doesn't matter. What matters, well, it does matter, but what really matters is the well-being of this person, that I, as the captain, or I, as the command chief, genuinely care about that person, care about them as if they're my brother, my sister, my son, my daughter, whatever. So that's really the simplest thing, is just being fully open to that and just giving love. And I think it's hard for some people within the military to express love, right? Like in that way, because we're so used to subordination, we're so used to rank, and, I'm in charge and I'm in power, and what you do what I say. Well, you can still love the people that do what you say, right? You can still express that. And guess what? When you do that, people are going to willingly do what you say. It's not the old trope of the hardliner, military person with all the medals on their chest and saying how powerful they are. It's the one that gets down in front of the people that need that they're serving. You're serving the people that are helping you. That's what you really are. Like, servant leadership is what I espouse.
That initial response is so powerful, and it's so rare compared to what you typically hear about how people respond when somebody discloses, and could be such a transformative experience for a survivor to have. I'm curious, how do you think, because your hope for leadership is so powerful and I think doable, but how can we achieve that and kind of begin to dismantle that sense of, I am above you, you are my subordinate, but there isn't a sense of respect and empathy? How can we intertwine those two things while still maintaining order and the job that is supposed to be done?
That's a wonderful question. And it's kind of a multifaceted approach, right? So within the service, I think it starts with accountability from the top down, right? It shows leaders willing to say, yes, in the past, we have messed this up, right? We own that cases have gone wrong, that we've hidden things, that we did not take this seriously, that we did not take survivors seriously. And it's documented. Like, I'm not just making this up, right? I sat on a Senate field hearing to say this very thing about my case and others. And it's all the branches, it's there. But there's still this deflection. There's still this political game that's happening where there's no accountability. And I can speak directly to many cases involving senior enlisted and officers that are accused of sexual harassment, sexual assault, and it gets swept under the rug. It's just like these people are just shown early retirement, is what they call it, right? There's no trial, there's no investigation. It's like, oh, they raped someone, time for you to retire. Here's all your benefits and have a good life, and that's so common. So, like, I think flipping that script of truly holding themselves accountable, right, and their colleagues, is the first step in changing that culture of, we can't hide behind this anymore, right? If we really care about not just our service members, but our country and the people that we're serving and the nation that we're serving, the ideals that we're supposed to be upholding, it starts with that, right? It starts with that. And that's what's going to plant the seed to change the rest of it, and it's a generational shift. It's going to take time. And that's what, and I was there too earlier in my survivorship. It's like, I just want this to be fixed now. And yes, like, if I had a magic wand and I can change it tonight, like, absolutely I would. But reality is what it is, right? And these are long generational issues. Like, these are systemic things, and we're making change, and we're doing it right now by having these conversations. Like, this is a big part of it, right? And it starts here. But having these discussions at the top level, and also at all different, within the military in particular, all different ranks, right? So at those induction points when people first join the service, that they understand this stuff. They understand not just the policy, which we do teach, of how to make a report and who do you talk to, and yes, 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 but like, hey, this is what it's been like. We've had these issues. This is why we have these policies in place, and we put our money where our mouth is, and we're going to take care of you if anything ever happens to you or your friends or your colleagues, right? Like, this is that change. So is it possible? Yes. Is it going to be difficult? Absolutely. But is there hope? 100%.
I think the hardest part about survivorship, or one of the really difficult parts to grapple with, is patience, right? And accepting that there is hope in time, but time is something that passes so, so slowly as you see other people experience the same thing. And it can be so frustrating. But I definitely appreciate the sentiment of, it is happening slowly, and even just us having this conversation right over the next 45 minutes is making some sort of difference. So I really appreciate you highlighting that, because it is such a difficult thing to surmount in that kind of brain obstacle of healing. So It seems like so much of your work is about institutional courage in the military and leadership reform. In your broader work and experience now, working with survivors, in other communities, talking with survivors, talking with leaders and advocates, so much of that is so similar to, I feel, like the sentiment of aspirational masculinity, especially in hypermasculine places. What does the term aspirational masculinity mean to you as both a male survivor, but also as a leader who is trying to institute mechanisms of change?
I love the thought on that, right? Because that's where we talk about where change happens, and there are many ways, but the education piece, right? And I think making awareness of what masculinity is, because to be quite honest, it's a male dominant society, right? And it has been for eons, and those paradigms are shifting, right? I mean, over the past century, you think of women's rights, and especially in this country, and how things have progressed. We regress sometimes, but we're progressing, right? It's all a forward momentum. So with the masculinity piece, right, and what aspirational masculinity means is kind of what I said about the leadership that I saw that was truly empathetic, right? That willingness to be vulnerable and open as a leader and as a man shows strength, right? It's not weakness. It's that paradigm shift. And I grew up in the 80s and 90s watching TV and movies in those times. And the masculine person was the one with the most muscles, the one that, killed the most people and fought the most people and never cried and stoic all the time. And, always had the right answer. And even if it meant, taking down half the people around, like, it's just toxic is kind of thrown around, but it's that idea of like me first always, and I'm always right and you're always wrong, and if you don't see it my way, then screw you, right? And that's like the traditional trope when it comes to a lot of what people think of masculinity. Aspirational masculinity is almost flipping that completely on its head. Like I said, it's that openness, it's that vulnerability, it's that, hey, you know what, I also have a softness in me, I have this feminine side, I have this part of me that can be very open, and I'm reflective, and I'm caring. And with that, I'm still strong, right? I'm very strong. I'm actually stronger because I know how to ask for help. I know how to raise and lead people. And we talk about the military structure, but I'm also the father of two boys, 13 and 14. I think about this daily. I see it, with my interactions with them and how they react and interact with friends at school. And you see it all the time. It's still there, especially with the social media aspect and the influence that has on young minds and what they're um, being exposed to, and how hyper fixated it is and how intense and repetitive, and it can be very brainwashing for some of these young men, right, that have no filter on that or no guidance in that realm. And it's what you put in front of them is what they're going to absorb and what they're going to grow into, right? So I think the aspirational piece of that is exposing them to the positive sides of masculinity, and understanding that there's a duality to it, right? There are times when it's okay to be tough, in the traditional sense of, being decisive and forthright with your ideas and taking charge of a situation. But there's that other part of it, right? There's the more important part. Like, you ignore the gentler parts of masculinity, you're denying what masculinity is. You're denying your true potential as a man. And I think that's what aspirational masculinity is to me. It's just being able to listen, right? And to be able to get out of our pig-headed and abrasive ways and to go, you know what, I don't know everything, and that's okay.
I totally agree with you. I think flipping it on its head and talking about how mental vulnerability is one of the strongest forms of masculinity and toughness. Like, masculinity is you standing on those stages, on those survivor panels, and talking about your experience and being able to open up and being able to unwaveringly answer a question. That's one of the bravest things I think a person can do. But it's so hard to reconcile that with the traditional definitions. But I think that slowly, as you are doing that, right, and traveling and speaking to especially these young men that I've seen you speak to, you are showing them that and demonstrating it. And that is such a powerful, again, kind of blip of change in that really long timeline that it takes to have a ripple effect among many people. When did you first connect with I Have the Right To? Could you share it with our listeners, with our newsletter readers? What motivates you to do work with us, and what maybe resonated about our mission?
I met the Prouts. All well, not all three, but Chessie and Alex, and I was at a summit, consent summit, which was incredible. That was this past November, and I was there on my own, kind of flying solo as part of Safe Waters, my nonprofit. One of the people that ran the consent summit heard about me through a friend and just invited me. They liked my story. And so I showed up and I spoke on the survivor panel. And when I was there, I sat on one of the breakout sessions, which was hosted by the Prouts. And I listened to their story and I was thinking, we relate our own story to what we're hearing many times, and I just heard so much hope in what they were saying. And there was a tinge of jealousy in me too, because I didn't have that support from my family, right? And I was just like, man, look at how far Chessie's come and how much her parents cared and drove this and how much stronger that made her to come out as such a young survivor. And I was just like, my goodness, like it's a horrible thing that happened to her, but look at what they're doing. Look at this. Like just incredible. I remember I met Alex. He was standing outside the conference room afterwards, and he was there at the table, and they had the books and everything. And I just said, "Hey, Mr. Prout, nice to meet you." He's like, "Yes, I heard you speaking earlier." And I was like, "I'd like to buy a book." He's like, "No, here's a book," and he gave me a copy of the book and a business card, and said, "Hey, let's be in touch." And I was like, "All right, sure, absolutely." And man, it happened quick. I think I emailed him a few days later, and the ball just started rolling. It's been such a beautiful like relationship that's forming, and I'm still taken aback by it. I've been speaking with different members of the team, and Karen's awesome. I think I told her after the last one we did in Rochester, because we all had dinner together, and I was speechless from how not just the Prouts, but everybody there, just like it's like a family. It was just this. It almost makes me want to cry. Like it was just so beautiful in the sense that we all just care deeply about each other, but deeply about what we're doing. And it's genuine and it matters. And that feeling of not being alone in this mission and this purpose and in this part of my life. And I feel like I'm just, banging the drum for everybody, but it felt really great, and it's been hard for me to trust other organizations sometimes and other people, obviously, with everything that's happened to me and to put myself out there. And I'm leaning into it, right? And I'm following my heart and I'm trusting the feelings I'm receiving, right? And to being a part of this with you guys and still holding true to Safe Waters and still holding true to my family and managing all those things at once and my transition out of the military all at the same time, right? It's a lot, but I feel really good having you guys on that same side with me because I know you support me, and I'm feeling like I'm supporting back. Right? It's kind of like you give what you get. And, kind of a long answer to your question, but that's how I started with I Have the Right To, and it's still forming. I think since November, it's only been 6 months. And it's the potential is palpable. Right? We're so much that can happen, and I'm in for the ride.
I feel exactly the same way as you about my experiences, especially in Rochester recently, right? It really felt like this joyful coming together of survivors, and having that particular audience was so validating to see so many young people, especially young men, participating so intently and asking so many questions, and their curiosity just being so piqued by the issue of prevention and aspirational masculinity. I'm curious what it was like for you, because I know for me, right, being in that room as somebody who didn't maybe have a support system as well in place in my community, seeing so many people come together over this issue and want to do better, not so long after, right? The community's failed, I think, either of us. How does it feel to witness that? And what does it feel like to your younger self?
I love that you say that about my younger self. And it's interesting because I do a lot of meditation and breathwork stuff, and I have relationships with my younger selves. It's not crazy, it's true, but I listen to that, and it's interesting that you mentioned that because I feel, especially with my teen and early 19, 20-year-old self around the time I assault, I still feel this hesitancy, right? It's almost like this, can I trust this, right? And it's like a jealousy tinge. I think I said that earlier. It's like a jealousy tinge. Like when I first met Chessie and them, it's like, hey, why are they so awesome? Like how come I didn't have that? And I realized like I didn't have that, and that's okay. It led me here, right? It is what it is. But there's still that little bit of me when I see these things. When I like the Rochester group, it's like how come I didn't have this? And how come? And I'm telling myself, I'm telling that part of me is like, you do have this now. You didn't have it then, but guess what? We have it now. Your boys, my 13 and 14-year-old, have this. Embrace it and love it and put yourself into it because it gives hope. It gives that feeling. And I felt that especially in Rochester and in UPrep and like all the places we've been. And I feel that when I go to Coast Guard, so with Safe Waters, like it's just this hope speaking to these, especially the younger generation, these teens. And in the Coast Guard, it's a lot of the 20-year-olds and where I was at that time, when I was assaulted, and hearing the conversations and the engagement is just so hopeful, and I'm glad that we have it now. Do I wish we had it then when I needed it? Of course. But I wouldn't be where I am now, right? So, like, I just feel this immense hope and beauty, and it's almost like riding a crest of a wave, right? And you're just feeling like a surfing analogy, right? You're just coming up on it, and it just you get this weightlessness, and I feel like that's where it is sometimes. It's just like, here we are, take it, just absorb it all, the sunshine, the spray, like all of it. Just get in there, and that's what I feel like when I see these younger people, especially, talk about this stuff.
That is such a beautiful way of describing that feeling. It's something I've really struggled to articulate, but I feel exactly the same way. There's this kind of battle in your mind when you're doing this work of a twinge of instinct, jealousy, of why didn't I have this? I feel like I deserve this support. But also that sense of hope of, you accept the situation for what it was because it's not something that can be changed now, but it's something that you can change for somebody else before it happens or after it happens, to have people be there and be ready to receive them. And so it is just such a beautiful thing to be a part of. I completely agree with you. It's healing. It's also something to overcome in that initial hurdle of, I feel like I really wish I had this. You mentioned and talked about not really receiving that support from your family or your community. Can you share maybe if there was somebody that was there for you? Who was there? How were they there in a way that was supportive? And how did they give you hope and get you through this journey or continue to propel you?
I'll say a quick note on what we just spoke about before I move on to this. But yes, we didn't have that when we were younger, Ray, but we are creating it. And that's powerful, right? And I keep reminding myself too, like a little like pat on the back and like pride forward type thing. It's like, yeah, we're doing this. Like we're making that change. Like, hell yeah. So anyway, on to your point about who is there to support me and who loves me. Several people in particular, I always give love and gratitude to my sister, whom you met at Seattle. And she was there when I first came out with my story. So I buried my story for 12 years. I didn't speak. I didn't even internalize it. Like it didn't happen to me. I couldn't face it. It was a survival mechanism. I know I repressed those memories and all that instantly. Anyway, so when I finally came out with my story in 2016, she was the first person I spoke to. I was living in Houston. She was in Seattle. I called her on the phone and immediately she's like, come up here and see me. Fly here. Come to me. And I did. And she's always been there for me. Always, 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 since I was a baby. She's 10 years older than I am. And she practically raised me, right? For reasons I don't need to get into on this one. But she's always been there for me. So I knew that was a safe space. And for a long time, that's kind of where I kept it. It was like with her, my best friend, Bradley, as well, and my wife at the time were like the only people that knew for several years, going through my investigation and going through all the hardships and struggles of the initial healing part of my journey. Those are the ones I trusted, and I'm so grateful for them. It was a very small circle at first, right? And it took me a long time to get to the point where it was the guilt and shame I know I was feeling that was keeping it so close to my heart and so close to my soul. And eventually when I started letting go of that and being more vocal and honest about myself and my, not just the assault, but all the things I've been through in my life. And that's when that circle opened up. Right. And that's when I started to feel the love and support of all my family. Right. Like everyone started to come out, mostly, with a few exceptions. And then friends started coming out through the woodwork, so to speak. And then I started, when we formed this community, right? Like when I started my little podcast, and then I started Safe Waters, and like that circle of love and support just kept growing and growing and growing and growing. So now I have so many people on my phone I know I can call 24 hours a day and say, hey, I'm having a hard time today. And they got me, whatever it is, if they just want they know I need to talk, or they know I just need to vent text, or if I need to, whatever it is, I have people that I can lean on. It's such a beautiful thing to have that, right? To find that. And I'll say any survivors out there going through it that feel like they don't have that, and maybe you don't in your immediate circle, right? Maybe it is family that's not there for you, or that is harming you, or it's work, like my situation, and you don't feel safe there. There are things, places, people that you can reach out to, and I think this is one of them, right? And we can connect people, and finding whoever it is that actually is going to be there for you and understand you. Sometimes you have to search for it, and it's hard, but I would just say know that you're not alone. No matter where you are in your journey, you're not alone.
I think so much of this work and of sharing your story leads to so many found family members, whether it is the people who maybe you weren't that close to who are in your actual family and your circle, or it's the survivors that you meet, or the Prouts who absorb everyone in their vicinity into their family. I think that's such a beautiful part of this horrible thing that is so dark, but that it starts conversations that can lead to so much realization and to so much solidarity with people who maybe didn't even realize they had an experience themselves, whether again that is in your family or in your friend group. I found that to be one of the most hope-filling and rewarding pieces of sharing my own story, and it sounds like maybe it was a similar experience for you. Um, so, what do you hope that with all of the work that you're doing and the support system that you have to kind of stand on while you are able to now share your story, that especially young men who maybe struggle with that culture of silence even more so than women do, what do you hope that they take away from your story and your advocacy, or that they feel? I know you kind of touched on that with that message of you are not alone, which is so powerful, but what else would you hope to say to them?
Yeah, it's definitely preface with you are not alone. I think that's the first message that needs to go out to men in particular. I was alone for a very long time, and it was terrifying, and it was isolating, and it was so heavy, to the point where I almost didn't make it, right? And I'm grateful I did, obviously, but I guess the other message I would have is it's okay to ask for help. It's okay to admit that something happened to you. It's not your fault. It wasn't necessarily a sexual thing. I think that's something a lot of men grapple with, right? That even if your body reacts a certain way, or if it's about power, and it's about control, and it's about manipulation. It's nothing wrong with you. You aren't the problem, and to shed light on what is the problem, right? It's these behaviors, this masculinity in many cases. It's this abuse of power, it's this abuse of position, it's this abuse of structure, it's this relationship abuse. It's all those things that are the issue, not you. You are not wrong. There's nothing wrong with you. You just need some help, and whatever that looks like for you. And to be patient with that. Be patient with yourself. Be patient with your journey, and give yourself grace. I think that's the big piece too, is giving yourself grace throughout all of it. If you're in the middle of the deepest, darkest well, give yourself grace. And if you've done some work, pat yourself on the back. If you went to your first therapy session and it terrified you and you cried, and, or you said nothing and you were clammed up, pat yourself on the back. You're doing the right thing. You got your shoes on, you went to the appointment, you did your thing, you're on your way, and which goes back to the first message of you're not alone. There's people that you can talk to that can relate, that can tell you that it's hard, and there's times it's not always going to be easy. That's one thing I like to tell people. Like, I don't give false hope or false promises. You have, like, oh, you're doing the right thing and things are going to be great from here on out. No, it's going to be hard. There's a lot of difficulty, and there's a lot of growth. And that's the cool thing about going through any kind of change. Like, it's hard and it's scary. It's kind of like a death of something, right? But what's on the other side of that? I don't know, but it's awesome, right? Like, who knows what's on the other side of healing? Just go, and you're going to be surprised at what you're going to find.
I love the way that you described that journey, and of not giving false hope, and of showing yourself grace. I recently had somebody in my life go through the reporting process after a few months after their experience. And right after they reported, they said, I'm freaking out, I'm feeling anxious, and I'm not understanding why it's affecting me this way now. It didn't affect me like this before when I wasn't thinking about it. And we kind of sat down and had a conversation about how there's this cliff of bricks that is waiting to fall on you after you experience sexual violence, and it's gonna fall. Like, that cliff is breaking, and it feels like you can ignore it, right? After it happens, it feels like maybe it happened to somebody else, or it's something that you can put out of your mind. But eventually, those bricks are gonna fall, and they're going to hit you. And it's something that you're gonna be able to get out from underneath, but you have to go through them before they go away, right? They're not a threat that is going to fade. It is a looming threat that we have to dive through, and it's unfortunate. But like you said, you never know where you'll come out on the other side. I think you can come out with such a deep understanding and a sense of self that is so unique and beautiful. And it's not to say that we should have to go through this experience or this journey to discover that sense of self, but to say there are silver linings to everything, and to look at those and look to those and have hope for those, because they will come, is so powerful. And so I'm so glad that you talk about showing yourself grace. It's not pretty to dive through a pile of bricks, and so many bad things can happen when you're removing them, and maybe you react in ways that you will regret, and that is okay. That is part of survival and instincts. You're not thinking about how to do other things besides survive in those moments. So we ask everyone at the end of our podcast, but also at the end of this interview series, to share one statement that aligns with "I have the right to." So if you could share, what is one thing that you feel you believe survivors have the right to, maybe young men, maybe survivors in general, whatever you see fit, but the right to something?
That's great. I think gearing this specifically to young men, I would say I have the right to be vulnerable. I think that says so much, and it can mean whatever the listener wants it to mean, right? But for me, I would like that vulnerability. I have the right as a man to be vulnerable, to be open, to learn, and to open my heart and see what comes in. I think that is beautiful, right? And that's the first thing that a man should be willing to do, is to be vulnerable.
I love that. Well, Julian, thank you so much for sharing, such a really, private sometimes and deep and vulnerable part of yourself, and for exhibiting that bravery that we talked about, and that masculinity in sharing your story and your experience, and being so bold and embracing your role as, an influencer to young men to change that culture, and also to leaders in your community to change that culture too. We really appreciate you taking the time. And is there anything else you would like to add before we head off?
Yeah, I would just say, first off, thank you, and thanks for this opportunity. But I would say with April, like you mentioned at the very beginning of this recording, it's a very heavy month for a lot of people out there. And we've been speaking a lot to survivors in particular, but I think we would be remiss if we don't mention allies, right? You don't have to be a survivor to help. You don't have to be a survivor to understand or to empathize with someone, especially during this month. So I would say to all the allies out there, all the people that may not understand intimately what we're talking about, but are willing to help, keep your eyes and ears and heart open this month, because it's a difficult season. Right. And I know me personally, in the past, I would shut down during this month. I would withdraw. I would drink. I would, just forget and just avoid whatever it was people were talking about on the news and on social media. Just be there for those people, just pay attention. That's what I would say. Pay attention to the people in your life.